Welcome to Philly Coco presents Side Project Spotlight, Episode 11. This is a developer's journey into making cool stuff. We are your partners on this epic road. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philadelphia-based Cocoa Heads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. Philly Coco's prime objective is to help you along your own development journey. And cut. How will we do it?
Nice. Success. We got it.
All right.
It took 11 episodes, and we got it, though.
I mean, I'm always going to refine it, but yeah, this is the closest I feel like we've gotten this intro.
You're going to have to update it, though, right, for RealityOS in the future.
Oh, crap, right. The rumored RealityOS. I guess... I
mean,
it's
not a rumor, man. I don't think it's a rumor. I think there's enough evidence in source code there really is something called that.
Well, they said that was in the recent beta, the one that you've serendipitously decided to download and play with.
I did just download it, yeah.
I heard that somewhere in the code, they do have a section for RealityOS. So yes, it's coming.
I thought somebody like accidentally pushed it, and then they got pulled.
Oh, really?
Like the code that was referencing it, but I don't know. Okay. That's just rumors.
It sounds likely that someone did that.
I mean, it is interesting having messed with Reality Composer for a while, and going, this is like a rudimentary, very bare bone, basic game engine in a way, like a starter kit, like of sorts, because you can do a lot of interesting things like create behaviors and attach them to objects, and then in your code call that object, and then trigger those behaviors, which is all interesting.
It's based on their like existing like gameplay engines, their Sprite Kit and Scene Kit. I feel like it has like the same kind of entity component system stuff going on.
Right, that framework. Yeah.
Yeah, so the RealityOS confirmation, if we're going to call it that, is coming from Steve Troughton Smith, because he's always looking through the source code of stuff. But he found like I don't know what he was looking exactly in here, but it's on Twitter, and he found that target feature RealityOS. So it looks like it has its own OS, and its own binaries, its own simulator. It's gonna be a thing.
I guess my reservation about it all is like, especially with that concept art for the goggle and the cost of the goggle, like is.
To be fair, that's all rumor now. We have but it's not outside the realm of plausibility. It's like plausible sounding rumors for Apple.
Yeah.
If you wanted to have like the hardware capable of actually running the stuff on the device rather than having to be tethered to a phone or a laptop, then it's got to cost as much as a MacBook.
I mean, it does kind of sound reasonable, even if you're just talking about iPhone chips. I mean, you think about how much an iPhone is, and then you have to have the screens and the other technology around it. But yeah, you're talking probably like an M1 or M class, whatever we're going to call it, chip in there. But yeah,
so
I think
it's not
going to
be like an A. Oh, geez, I don't know.
Well, it could be the M1. The M1 is like isn't it like an A14 that they souped up? I mean, that's not completely fair, but like it's the same kind of architecture. It's like the same family. Like I think it was A14, and then that kind of led into the M1 because they have very similar cores, but like more of them and different other features, I think. And then the M1 Pro and Max are like even more along the same family line, where they have the same cores as the M1, essentially, like very similar. And then they add more of them, and then they add other features on top of that, like the encoding engines for video exports and stuff, and more GPUs, that kind of thing. So then the next set of chips would probably be based on whatever the next chip is that's coming out, or the last one came out. So
I kept thinking it would somewhere be between the watch chip and the iPhone chip. Like I was under the assumption, right?
It's got to push so many more pixels if it's going to look good. It's got to be more on the level of an iPad Pro, I feel like, to get like a good graphics experience.
Yeah, that
you need like
sense.
You need high res screens right in front of your eyes, because they're really close to your face. So you have to have a lot
the
of
watch is
pixels.
like few hundred pixels.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, geez. But the thing is, like, this is supposed to be like a mixed reality goggles, right? Somewhere in the range like 1,000 to 2,000, or 2,000 to 3,000.
Yeah,
in terms of cost. Like,
but that's a lot. I don't know, that price sounds so expensive, but because you can get an Oculus. What is the Oculus?
For $300.
It's $300 for
I mean,
what
they're doing it
Oculus
at cost, but like, yeah.
They have the benefit of like already scaling that, but also I feel like that's on the level of like a low end mobile thing, and it's not super high resolution. Like, I don't think it's that great in terms of resolution.
Here's my question then: what's Apple's, like? What are the major use cases for a $1,000 or $2,000 mixed reality headset version 1.0? Because it's not like the AR glasses that everybody really has been dreaming about. It's not going to be able to necessarily, I would right away, be as great for games as I would think Oculus is, because it's not established and it's Apple, and Apple games are not as big of a thing, even though they tried Apple Arcade. What do you think?
I think it's a glorified dev kit, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's like a Series 0 in my mind.
Oh yeah, so it's a platform for the developers to make the experiences that are going to make people want to buy the $300 version whenever that's ready.
I mean, so if I'm a developer though, and at WWDC they announce this thing, and it's like it's $1,000, we'll say, and I buy this thing. What am I releasing? Like if the $300 version doesn't exist yet, is it how much? Who's going to be the target developer that it's worth to build for this platform now? Because you can't, because who knows when the cheaper one will be out.
I feel like people are already making stuff for AR now, and to like make the next level experiences, not for people like us who have to spend our own money on a dev kit. It's like for big companies that are working on big projects already.
It feels like it would work really well for vertical markets. So the opportunities for like construction workers or warehouse people who are going around, they don't have to carry an iPad or whatever, some kind of clipboard thing. They could just look and scan. It's like, where's my inventory? And it would know based on, I don't know, however they end up coding it, but or like go look at a barcode scan it, and through a finger gesture, immediately it would go to sales and take care of itself, like those types of markets, right? Or a doctor who would go look at some medical records and then get this sort of real-time feedback of all the information about the person, be able to see their EKGs, be able to see, heck, maybe even be able to see their their heart rate, dynamically, right?
Yeah. So the Oculus, the cheaper Oculus, what is it called? The name of it?
Quest.
Yeah. So the Quest has some limited augmented reality feature that's relatively new that uses, I think it has like infrared cameras, or has like black and white cameras of some sort on the outside. So it kind of, I saw some demos of this, and it has this limited ability. And I'm guessing that whatever Apple comes out with would have much better cameras on it. So it still feels like something I don't know if I want to walk around with them on, but maybe if I'm stopping to do a task where it's benefiting, I don't know. I guess it depends on how well they work. I feel like I'd get motion sickness or something if I'm looking through a camera the whole time, but I don't know.
I mean, there's a weird depth perception, right? That's going to get messed up because you have all this information in front of you, and then you're doing this weird gesture to like either like swipe them away or whatever, however you interact with them, and then your eye's trying to focus on something. It's got like things in its way. I can imagine that being a very stressful experience for the user.
I do see some, as you said, vertical spaces, design, different kinds of design, architecture, engineering design. I mean, if you're sitting at a desk, like this is kind of like the was it the HoloLens or something? Some of those other products came out where it was more focused on you're sitting at your desk doing some kind of engineering work or something like that. I could see that being useful there too. Right. I don't know if that's what they're going to target it at, but to be able to visualize certain kinds of three-dimensional, artifacts, like and be able to see it in maybe some kind of specialized, visual VR space. I mean, I could see some utility in that. I don't have a lot of direct experience with using the VR and AR stuff because I don't want to spend my money on on like an Oculus. Maybe I should because they're pretty cheap for what they are, but.
I mean, I don't know about you, Aaron. The experience that I've had with it, with the Rift and any VR experience in general, what you're doing is fundamentally like like closing your kind of like all your visual space, right? Peripheral and everything. And then you're in this world, right? Whatever is projected on your screen, and you're sort of experiencing it as if it was real. And it's a little jarring in a lot of ways because you're kind of completely immersed. It's actually kind of funny because like Oculus Rift, if you don't put on your headgear correctly, you kind of have this like you can kind of see like the outside world like sneak in your peripheral, and that's the really jarring part. Like if you don't have it snug, like and completely immersed, any bit of light coming in from the outside will kind of mess with your experience because you can kind of see it as almost like a letterbox experience.
The rumored design for this upcoming Apple one is it looks like a refined kind of Oculus, right? It looks like it's kind of supposed to cover your entire, eye line.
I mean, it looks like a glorified ski mask, if you ask
me. Well, I know. I don't put too much stock into the renders. Were any of the renders based on what someone said they actually saw? Like sometimes you'll say these renders and like, well, I actually have a photo of the prototype or something, but I don't know what their source is for these besides.
I mean, it makes sense, but it's kind of funny because like I could see it actually being really useful for like taking to the slopes and using the Slopes app.
Yeah, using the Slopes app.
Shout out to you, Curtis.
He doesn't listen to this.
I know he doesn't. But, you got to have hope one day. Yeah, you always assume that your regular podcast is your first or whatever. But going down the slopes and kind of seeing real time like your performance, right? That would actually be pretty cool, and that the goggles would really fit because like you don't have to change your typical ski goggles then. But like walking down the street, no way.
Yeah, with given Apple's like design experience, I would not be surprised if this is significantly lighter and more comfortable than competitors when it comes out. Like that could be its main characteristic. Maybe it's visually, maybe its computing power isn't as great, or maybe it is about the same level as something like the current Oculus, the $300 Oculus or something like that. But it's lighter and stuff because they have. They still seem to have the best in the industry in terms of chips, in terms of performance per watt and all. So maybe they can make a really lightweight one. It's more comfortable to carry around with you to use in different situations.
So here's my counterpoint to that. Looking at the comps, would you be caught dead walking down the street with them?
No.
That's
like
my point,
I'm saying,
right?
I don't think you'd be. I don't know if you'd be wearing them like walking around, but carrying them with you. Like my thing is, if it's meant to be, is it meant to be portable or not, and to what degree? If you're at a desk, it has to be lightweight and comfortable so you can wear it for an extended period of time, and that's probably what they're aiming for. But if you want to take it with you, it seems like it'd be about as portable as the big wireless headphones would be, and you'd put it in a case or something.
But at that point, like, what is the point of AR, right?
Yeah,
I think like AR on some level is to to take this world and sort of enhance it, right? For lack of a better term.
That's the rumored glasses version of this. That's what's a little confusing about all this stuff,
right? And that's where my like if the intention is for me to walk around in it, right? To allow me to walk around, because I think that's the opposite with VR. I think you have to be stationary because there are a lot of reasons why it's not a good idea to be walking around in VR. VR does not acknowledge the world outside, the real world, right? No. So like I see kids like playing Beat Saber and like start swinging right towards the TV set.
Yeah, that's not good.
And so you have like all these like really potentially really bad accidents. Who knows if like what type of, and like the moment you come out of it, it's a really jarring experience. Like when you take off the goggles, you're just like, oh, too much light. It takes a little while to readjust. I think AR is lesser of that experience in my mind, but doesn't this feels like this weird like trying to play both sides, if you will, of like I want my cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see what this thing looks like. I expect that WWDC is when they'll show something. I feel like there's too much smoke now to not have some fire in this by the end of the year.
I would agree. I think it is highly plausible. At the very least, the development kit will be out for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think given supply chain issues, especially right now, I wouldn't be surprised if the actual production was delayed. Like everything is so back ordered. MacBooks are like 10 weeks back ordered, depending on the model.
I can see them announcing it for WWDC, like this is what it looks like, and this is what it does, and this is why you as developers will want to build it, right? And then we are going to use what we already know, which is Reality Composer, and we're going to create this new thing called RealityOS, and taking advantage of all the things we learned with ARKit, et cetera, right?
Yeah,
We behind the scenes, we've been working on this secret OS, whatever, right? Like,
yeah, like when they did like the Mac OS transition originally, right, to Intel, right. And like, oh, we already have it working.
Yeah. We have a working prototype, and now we're going to show you all these amazing demos.
Yeah, that would. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a fun WWDC though.
Yeah. So. I think this is going to be one of the because last year, like what was
they didn't even do they even do any ARKit updates last year of any significance?
They did,
like headliner,
but they didn't promote it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what they, because previous years they would always have a big promotion for it. But
I think one of the interesting things. Like I haven't noticed anything in terms of like masking or occlusion. Like they've done stuff with masking and occlusion map, but they're not promoting it in any real way or having really good APIs to do that kind of work, to separate to sort of get the 3D object to really blend into the camera view. I don't know if you've messed around with anything like that, Aaron, but I haven't.
I was messing around with the like people occlusion thing. It doesn't seem like it does anything with any other objects in the scene. Like it only recognizes people. So there's just like people and then the background. So I think, and I realized this right away when I was messing around with it. I was like, oh, you really need an understanding of all the other objects and the depth of all the other objects to like get the full immersive thing, unless you're just staying in one spot. If you want to move around, then it's like you really want to sit. No, and I think you can do that, but I don't think there's really an API for it, for like as easy as like the people occlusion, which is fairly simple, but it was not playing nice with our little prototype we were doing. So it wasn't playing nice with the location stuff, which I think is something else. The locations, there's like location or like forget what it's called for placing stuff in the real world, and I was getting like weird errors for saying I was like putting stuff in not the right place for so it didn't know where to put the people mask in. So.
It seems like right now our prototype doesn't really anchor well to the space you're in, like because it just seems to be doing it based upon the geolocation. So when I tested it, as you said, it'll place like the orange ball like a little too close to the camera or something like that, and it's not clear to me exactly where it's going to go. Where my expectation with these types of apps when I've used them before is you choose like where to put them, like you place it down on a particular location. So I just think we need to work on the anchoring of it. That's probably the main thing.
Yeah, there's like a reverse geolocation thing where you place it and then you use like your environment to look up the location, but that only works in like it's got to have like landmarks that it can see, and there's only certain cities that it recognizes, and so it certainly won't work inside.
Yeah, I don't know how to get around it, because what I want to be able to be like where I am, and then in this particular space, which is difficult because as you said, you need to know the environments. You need to map the environment too, right? In order to place it.
So you can have like a multi-stage thing. You probably just like keep track of the location, which is only going to give you, a city block or something, or maybe a little bit smaller. And then if you're inside, that it's a separate like data structure for the AR experience in the particular space.
Yeah, or you just anchor to something completely differently, like you anchor to like a tag or a code or
that's
some
the easiest
recognition. Thing. Yeah, and the people occlusion thing. I mean, it sounds like they created a machine learning model to do it. That's what I'm guessing. They use some kind of a model for that, and since you can't have an arbitrary model like for any kind of thing, that would make sense to me why it's not so easy to do other things. But you didn't find any kind of more general API, like you can feed it in a model to try to do occlusion for something else?
Well, there's you probably could use like the vision framework and use one of the because it's what it's doing is like a segmentation mask. So it's like painting all the pixels in this in the scene with a and labeling them as objects, and it's like a simple like two like class thing of it's just labeling like the person. Oh, I see a person, and then like kind of everything else is like background that isn't moving. But there's like more sophisticated models that will like do more type of objects, and you could probably plug them in through like the core ML stuff to get it to work. But I don't think there's anything that's an API that's already set up to do that.
Yeah.
I was like messing around with some of like this type of vision stuff with my data science stuff I was doing. So I know it's like a thing you can do, but I'm not sure if like the iPhone is capable of doing that real time with like that many things. It seemed like it was struggling as soon as I turned on this like people occlusion thing.
Which iPhone model?
This is a 12 Pro. So
I have an 11 Pro, so it's even slower.
Oh man, I got a 12 mini, so it's
we're all
gonna struggle, which is good. This is good to know. This is good to know. Like on that type of device, it would struggle.
It takes a lot of processing power. It is kind of surprising because these phones are so fast. Right. I mean, like if you think about it, my laptop we're doing this recording on right now is an M1, the 13-inch M1. And that's basically the same. It's basically like souped up version of what was it, the iPhone 12 chip or something, right? Something like that. So it's pretty amazing how fast they are. But even so, AR is just and it's just a whole other level of math involved.
Well, yeah, if you're trying to do like a real time camera feed and then do like a real time machine learning inference on a whole bunch of things of the camera feed, then you're kind of sucking up a lot of processing power for that thing.
If you scan the environment first and create a map, and then you can kind of, like on a flat surface especially, then you can drop stuff there, and at least while the scene is active, it's fine. It's not as bad. That's what they demoed, for years in ARKit, that kind of experience.
I mean, that actually would be kind of interesting to sort of, from a UX point of view, sort of like create this sort of like sci-fi experience of like, AR's not going to work until you scan the scene, right?
There's a video from WWDC I watched the other day, which goes into how to make good user interfaces for good AR experiences, and they talk about this kind of thing, like how do you walk someone through scanning the environment, and so they know what to do without having to put a lot of text on the screen, and to show how to do it in an intuitive way, and it's its own kind of subspecialty of UI design because it's very different. It's not just putting stuff up on screen. They do talk about though how to do user interface, how to do text. Like you could have the text just on a wall or something in one of the examples, and then they have different names for it, but you could have it there, but then it's going to be smaller when you're farther away versus when you get closer to it. But then you can also have one where it's just basically stuck to your screen. That way that's good for UI elements. You need to stay there, like menus, buttons, or something like that. And there's like you'd have to think about like what you want to do. So they use an example of the measurement app where there's a way of you can do the icons there so that regardless of how far away you are from the object, the text is always the same size. So if you look at the measurement app, when you scan like a table or something, if you get closer to it, the text for the actual length of like the table, it stays the same size. It just kind of adjusts to the the view that you're looking at. So when you're really far away from the table, of course the line is going to be real short because the table is now small in your viewpoint. But the text that tells you how wide it is going to be the same size. You can still read it.
Are they scaling the text, or is that just like they put it on a plane and then they adjust the positioning based on that?
I think it's kind of like that
of how close you are, because I know like game design will do something similar.
Well, as I said, you can scale the text with distance, or you can not. You can lock it in place, but in this it's not. The text is still attached to the object. It's just that the size of it stays the same. So everything else gets scaled, but the text stays the same size. You can read it. And they talk about that, a lot of little tricks like that they do in their apps, and they recommend you do to provide a good user experience. So that's what I was going through the other day, last week, trying to get my head back into the AR game. Because
I think one of the interesting things about it's such like an evergreen experience with AR. That I think part of our own journey of figuring out how to build these apps is like we have to sort of get ahead of the UX experience, the UX of it, in terms of like, okay, it's like, how do we make sure that it doesn't get too much in your way, but give you the information you need at the time that you need it?
Yeah, I think we had the similar thoughts, because that's why I started doing that research. I started going through there's like a playlist or something of stuff in WWDC about how to make good AR experiences. So that's why I started looking at it. It's that and Ray Renderlich. They're like my two sources of information, and apparently
Ray Renderlich, for sure.
So besides looking over the AR experience, I know that Aaron was doing some stuff right last week with ARKit and also like ray casting. You were saying?
Oh yeah, we were just talking about it before the podcast of messing around with just kind of detecting different objects in the scene and finding a point of where they are, so you can place an object. And it's like fairly easy to use, at least for like if you want to place an object on a wall or on a table or something, and it's not too many lines of code. You can do raycast query and get back a point that you can anchor your object to. I haven't gotten into like the tracked raycast where it like will track the object through the scene, but that's another API that exists.
So the raycast API, you're using that to position an object or to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
To position something. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually messing with. There's a face painting app that is a demo app from Apple that will allow you to use PencilKit framework to draw paint on your face in real time.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it uses that same ray tracing tech to sort of like figure out where to put your the drawing on your face. And I assume it's using a combination of that and face detecting technology from Apple, like a combination of those two.
I did get the app running like yesterday on the beta. There was no problems with the beta Xcode, and I had multiple bouncing orange balls on my desk, and the sound effect that you chose for it is like a little too long. That's I start tapping around, and I'm just it's like boing boing. Oh my god!
Well, they didn't have one that had one bounce sound.
Right, I was like, it sounds like a basketball bouncing.
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah.
Once again, you had to go and download the audio, but not a bad experience though, because Xcode was just like, there's an error in here, and you like look at the error and you said can't find the audio file. So you're like, okay, and then you open up Reality Composer and you download the audio file, and then go back to Xcode and everything works. So it's not a bad experience when we update these things. I didn't see any way of switching to the box though. Like, I don't think we built a UI for that.
Oh, there's no way to do that now from a UI point of view, but it's something that I should probably add if we're going to experiment with different components.
We have a box with a label attached to it right now as well.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's one of those weird, like, it'll pre-generate like once you save it in Reality Composer, it'll pre-generate the function calls to load the scene as well as the object, so that you have access to like, okay, load box, load ball, load, whatever, and then you can say like find this entity inside that scene. So like if there's like two 3D objects in one scene, like there's a text label that you can change on the fly, and you can say like find this text label and then change the text to something else. Again, following that entity component system model, it's kind of easy to traverse into that scene.
So it's generating an API for you,
basically. Yeah,
for the scene.
Right. Even though they still have ways to, like, if you don't trust that function, you can load it by calling it by its name. But I don't know.
That saves a lot of time if you can start with something like that.
I think they've been slowly, incrementally building up ARKit.
Yeah.
Every year for the past 4-ish years now. It's not always a big splash, but there's always something there. I remember with SpriteKit, it was always, there was like a big splash, and then like a semi-big splash, and then it kind of dwindled over time. And that doesn't seem to be the case with ARKit, at least as far as I can tell.
Right.
So that's usually a good sign. Like, okay, like they're committed to this API, or they're committed to like pushing this beyond, maturing this to a point. It hasn't matured yet, and they're going to invest more development energy onto it. So I think that's a good indicator. Like, okay, like glasses will be coming, or the goggle will be coming at some point. And I guess maybe this year I think might be a stretch, but maybe a dev kit version might be a possibility.
Yeah.
But again, like I would like to be ahead of that game if I can.
Which means we need to come up with a specific project that's actually an app. That would do something besides just plop some random objects into a scene.
Well, yeah, we've just been messing around with the APIs, trying to figure out what they do, really.
And
it's such a different space. I thought we would be able to more quickly come up with a project to work on, but when you're doing this, part time, the AR space, it's so different than the regular app development. It's just like everything's different. So it's like it's even more than going from UIKit to Swift UI.
Yeah, it's very much like game development stuff. A lot of the language and stuff that you have to deal with of graphics and rendering and all of that. It's like working with a game engine, like Kotaro was saying.
So you guys, though, you two have done that more often because you do game jams regularly and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know how regular. It's been like 3 years or something since I've done one. So.
Well, I've done one this past January, so I guess not intentionally. It was more like I was helping my local game development community, Philly Game Mechanics, with their Global Game Jam. Global Game, and we've talked about this before, but Global Game Jam is a global game jam, aka hackathon. Usually, it's a 48-hour compressed set of time based on a theme. So this year's theme was duality, and so we made a game based off of that theme. Because of the whole pandemic situation, we were allowed some leeway in terms of how we structured the game jam. So we, as a community, had voted for about 10 days, a 10-day game jam, as opposed to like a 48-hour game jam. They gave people time to better collaborate, better communicate through Zoom or Discord or whatever your chat service of choice would be, and then hopefully build a better product over time. And I think the beauty about game jams and hackathons, by some extension, is that it allows us to build the prototypes or flesh out an idea that we might have had on a game. You would likely only build like one mechanic for a game, so it'd be nothing more than a glorified prototype. But there are a lot of opportunities there, I think, when you're not sure about a game, right? In most cases, you would only invest a weekend, to maybe about a week, 2 weeks, to see whether this fleshes out. A lot of companies do something like that, where they might have like a week where their developers are allowed to team up and build on some kind of idea for the company. Or like I know like SEPTA, our local transportation service here in Philadelphia, used to have hackathons, I think it was a 48-hour hackathon based on their APIs. And there would be fitness ones in near the art museum, I think. I think Curtis had that was the genesis of Slopes, was that he actually produced the prototype in a pseudo hackathon.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, the Sept APIs, I remember looking at them.
Oh, geez, they were horrible. I mean, not horrible, but they were just hard to deal with.
Yeah. They have some kind of they have an app, and they use they don't. As far as I can tell, they don't use those exact APIs for their app. They have like a private, I think APIs. I used like a Charles proxy on my iPhone a couple years ago to like to look at what the actual official SEPTA app was communicating with on the back end, and it was going towards like some API servers that they had. So I don't think they're using the exact same APIs. Because you can find some version of these publicly on GitHub, but they're old, and I don't think they've been updated anytime recently.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the first version or like an early version was like SOAP based, like XML.
SOAP. It's really funny. So we with SOAP was so bad because it was all XML and stuff,
right.
And it was all generated. And then we went to like REST. Everybody's like so big on HTTP APIs with with resources, and everybody uses the same HTTP verbs. And now we're back to like gRPC and like and other kinds of like RPC based based stuff now, right. Which is pretty funny to me. But it's not XML, so I guess that's why people are not as mad about it.
No,
it's the XML that made people mad for some reason. It's like,
I mean, it's weird because like it was like very convoluted XML. It was like really verbose.
But like JSON, really, but we all moved, the whole industry. We all moved. This is a complete tangent now, but the whole industry moved to JSON, which is great in a lot of ways, except that it's missing like so much that makes it makes life harder. Because like I remember early on, there might be a standard now, but like there was no standard for how dates should be represented, and that was when we were building an API years and years ago. This is like probably like 10 years ago now. Like we were building this API, and I literally had problems between clients because they didn't understand how to interpret a date, and because the Microsoft framework we were using to actually serve the data was doing one thing when it would serialize the dates, and then the clients were doing different things, and we had to like do a custom serialization just to get everybody on the same page. And it's like just because there was no standard, whereas if you're doing something with XML, you could at least define everything. Like that was the thing, you could define your schema, and then everybody agrees on that contract. So now we're in a world where we're back to doing that again, kind of. We're back to different kinds of contracts between the servers and the clients that are like more explicit, and then which is good in a lot of ways. But I remember that time, and I was like, this is pretty funny. Like I'm not big on XML, but I was like, now I have this new headache where I can't even get a date to work, and if that doesn't work right, like so many things break if you can't serialize dates properly.
I mean, it's still a problem with like feel like with gRPC. Like there would be so many times where all of a sudden like it would break, and I have no idea why. So like not so much like the contract had changed, but I had not known about it. So I have to regenerate the contract. I mean, basically on the client side to accommodate for this new change.
Well, right, yeah, and that's the code gen approach to these things. Which is at least you can do that. I once tried to code gen. I think if I remember correctly, the code gen, the client, like the Objective-C client for our custom REST API in Visual Studio. Like there's a mechanism, and I'm forgetting T4 file or something. I think they were. There's a mechanism you could do in Visual Studio where you could create these templates to generate other source code. And I think I had one trying to generate the Objective-C like model or the Objective-C some level of the client code. It didn't work super well. It was not great.
I used something when I remember back in the day when my colleague refused to give me a JSON output for his SOAPs API.
He's like, no.
I was just like, he was like, no. And I was like, all right, fine. I'll use something called Cocoa Soap.
Oh yeah.
Which at the time was free, which would create the a client for that a consumer for that Slope API, and thus I can just pull it in, convert it into objects, and then work with those in Objective-C. Back in the good old days.
So you're saying you use gRPC, right? You're using it on some projects. So I haven't. I've only played around with it a little bit, and I was just looking into it the other day. So like, what do you have any insight into how this works for mobile stuff?
Here's sort of the observed, without getting too much into detail. We used it almost as if we used it like we would normally use REST, right? In terms of like it's a unary call. It's just basically a request to pull down a set of data. There was very little in terms of like updating data or because what you're basically doing is like saying, okay, here are some methods that we should both be able to agree on that pulls down this model and and then a lot of it's based on like and the model is generated is defined by a proto file
right,
that's provided that you sort of create the contract with the server side.
And what's the authentication mechanism for that?
I'm trying to remember exactly. I guess it's defined by it's hard to say because like ours was kind of bare basic in terms of like authentication keys, but it's really hard to without getting too much in the weeds about it.
And but the big difference between like gRPC and a REST interface is that contract. So, right, if I'm understanding correctly, if you're going to use a gRPC as a client, you need to get that protofile. You need to understand what the contract is.
You need to get the protofile, but the protofile is not what you ultimately use. It's like you generate. We were using like gRPC Swift to convert that protofile into a Swift readable, Swift models and methods.
Now, on a REST API, though, you need to know what the endpoints are, and there's different methodologies for you to be able to interrogate one of these things. But the difference is once you know what those endpoints are, like you only have a set number of HTTP verbs. So it's kind of like if you need to interoperate between a bunch of different systems and you don't know who they are, like you can't necessarily give them the proto file and everything. Like you have a REST system and it theoretically makes it a little easier to interoperate so other people can get access to it when they want to. Like they could sign themselves up to be able to access the API. Whereas the gRPC stuff, it's better for for stuff you control both sides of, and when you have to have certain performance characteristics and things for it. At least that's kind of the thinking I've had when I've been looking into it as a possible use case, because it really depends on what is the context within which your system is working. Like if you're just between your clients and your server, then you could basically use anything that kind of works for you. But if you're thinking of this service is going to be working with our clients and other people at the institution or the enterprise or other people outside, then you have to really think about other things. And it seems to me still today that REST as a or REST-ish or RESTful kinds of clients are still the more common when it's publicly facing, when we have public consumers of it. But I do see more and more like gRPC type
I think
implementations.
gRPC lends itself in scenarios of like real-time feedback and real-time dynamic changes. So if you have like a lot of data that's updating, it's like little bits of parts of it at the same time. It does a really good job of that type of performance. Or if you're like a game is a really good example of like the modern Unity multiplayer games will use gRPC because they kind of need that. They need that quick feedback.
It's using HTTP 2 or 3? 2, I think.
2.
And so so I think some of that is because of the HTTP 2 because how that works. Like you could do it, but the payload sizes are also a lot smaller than typical JSON REST calls. So that's an important characteristic too. So gRPC and all these other RPC style stuff. I just think it's funny they were kind of like in the computing world. It just kind of moves in cycles. You just kind of keep. I think what happens is you have multiple things happen, but I think one of the things is you have new people coming into the field, and then like there's like no institutional memory, or there's not a lot of it sometimes, and people just reinvent the wheel over and over again. And it's kind of funny when you've been around long enough. You're like, wait, that looks exactly like what we did 15 years ago, just like a different implementation of it or a more refined version or something. But they act like it's brand new.
I almost feel like at some point, like what happens is it gets abandoned for a variety of reasons. Maybe the development environment wasn't, or the hardware requirements weren't ready for it at the time, and so then they come back to it later and be like, okay, like this might work for this environment now. Versus, and I can't speak to a very obvious example, but like, stuff like ray tracing, which is a really hard, it's the type of thing where in game development it's like, well, we can't do that because that's super expensive. That's that's for those people in the 3D rendering space.
Yeah, right.
But now you can do it in real time. It's like, all right, well, I'll bring it back.
So the ARKit does it does some kind of I don't know if it's using ray tracing, but it does something where you can, it'll try to do proper reflections of the environment you're in.
Yeah.
Like if you have a shiny object, right? Like they have this, they always tout this in the WWDC stuff. Like, oh, you put it in here and we're going to render this so that it's, and then remember the demos and it's like reflecting like the colors, reflecting of the things next to it and behind it and stuff. I don't know if it's using real-time ray tracing for that or some kind of approximation technique that just, that vaguely looks like they could be doing that. But
that would be actually kind of interesting to explore. Is trying to take that reflective ball, which we do have, and just sort of figure out how much of that is done by Apple and how much we can actually push it to using ray tracing to get a closer proximity. Because I think in the end we're trying to make, the thing that always breaks the immersion with AR is the fact that it just feels out of place in the scene.
Yeah, the size and the lighting.
Right.
I mean, and I think the size have gotten pretty well down because ARKit does a good job of keeping things at the right size and scaling them based on your distance. Like that seems to work pretty reliably and realistically. It's over the generations of ARKit. I've noticed that it's gotten better at the light reflections and making it look like it's actually in an environment.
Yeah, I think part of the thing, like I was talking about earlier, is how much the thing is going to stay in one spot and how much you are going to stay in one spot as the observer. Like, you maybe can move a little bit, but I feel like you have to do a lot more work if you want to like move around the room, like all the way to the other side of the room or something like that, or in and out of different rooms. I think that there's a lot more work that you have to do to make that stay realistic because it's just more rendering of stuff.
Yeah, and you need to know more about the environment too.
Yeah,
great example is like if you're walking through a room. Let's say you want to see how a router would look in this room or that room or whatever. You need to and you're walking from the bedroom to the living room. Maybe you're trying to see a repeat where would be a great place to put a repeater, right? Or where would be a really good place to other generic examples like furniture or even like a flooring, like just how would that look in this scene, and then keeping track of that along with like all the tangential like objects in that scene, right?
Yeah,
like how much of that is on you to keep track of in your session. So I think those are the challenges that are involved with ARKit. That's something we can explore within the next 2 weeks. And just in terms of putting an object in the space, walking in different areas, and then coming back to it and making sure it stays in state, as well as I guess trying to manipulate the object. I think those are a couple things that we can kind of explore.
Last time we said we were going to look at occlusion mapping, which Aaron did a little bit of, and interactions with 3D objects.
Right.
We didn't really get to the interactions, and the text-based GUI stuff I started trying to do, and I didn't get it to work yet.
I actually experimented a little bit. There is a toggle you can adjust, not a toggle, but like a checkbox where you can assign a physics to it, and then that gives you access to gestures like zoom in, zoom out, rotate, and move commands.
Let's try to get the thing. Let's try to manipulate it a little bit for next time.
I don't know. Maybe just get rid of the location stuff for now because it seemed like that was causing problems. So I was thinking about making just like a new scene and just kind of putting the location stuff aside for now because. And then, if you're just trying to do something inside because it's February right now in Philly and freezing cold. So at least for now, Thursday it was 60 degrees, but now it's 20 degrees again. Whatever.
Right. So we have another, not a sponsor. Good friend ARKit has created an app. He's still working on the finishing touches. We've pushed him to great lengths to try to finish it, but he's got requirements he needs to finish.
It's the grocery timer app.
GroceryTimer.app. Yes, it is you can sign up and he'll send you a test flight build. It's basically a grocery app that is well designed. It was done in Flutter, so it's cross-platform, whether you're iOS or Android. It has a really nice aesthetic. and it allows an interesting onboarding process, and it allows you to bring a grocery list and then create kind of like a pseudo playlists based on these grocery lists for different recipes. And then you can actually go into other websites, and I think he has a screen scraping service that will allow you to actually pull down all the recipe items, for which then you can take with you to the grocery store.
And the main feature that you're missing is the timer thing, that it tracks the age of all your stuff that you bought.
Right.
Make sure your stuff doesn't spoil and remind you to use stuff that has a specific shelf life.
Yeah, that's actually very cool. So I've been using grocery apps for a long time. I've tried a bunch of different ones, and I've tried ones that are attempting to give you the same kind of feature, or to track what's in your pantry, as it were, and so you know things don't spoil. And this actually seems to work pretty well. It's a well-designed app, so you should check it out.
Yeah, it's one of those apps that is well crafted, I should say. Yeah. So, and there's an appreciation for the craft of app development, and you can see it there. So great job, ARKit.
So are not a sponsor. It means again, we're not actually sponsored by ARKit or a grocery store. We just like it, and we're just trying to support some local developers. Mm-hmm. So check out. We'll put the link in the show notes for grocerytimer.app, which is actually a domain name if you didn't know. Like that's a top level domain name .app. Yep. So that's pretty cool.
All right. Well, I think we are at time. If you would like to find us, you can find us at phillycoco.org. We also have a Twitter account at phillycoco, and you can also sign up at our meetup and find us there and hang out with us at our monthly meeting and our side projects.
Yeah, side project Saturday.
Side project Saturdays, right? So aside from that, again, we are always a work in progress. So if you have any questions, feel free to find us there. Would you be caught dead walking down the street with them?
No.